Topic is something different. This is the probably first class of the orthopedics. So today's lecture is something regarding the general principles of the fractures. What is fractures? So in seventh, we will be dealing with the fractures, that is acute condition, and in eighth semester, we will be dealing with the cold orthopedics. So orthopedics, it is divided into two parts, acute and cold orthopedics. So in seventh semester, we will be dealing with the fractures mainly, and in eighth, we will be having the cold orthopedics that includes disease, congenital disorder, and all those things. So what is fracture? So fracture, as it is defined. So these are the topics we will be discussing today. Definition of the fractures, mechanism, diagnosis, classifications, fracture healing, and further some different fractures like fractures in children, pathological fractures, its management, open fractures, and complications of the fractures. So these are the brief topics that will be discussed today. So what is fractures? So if you see in the diagram, there are two pictures over there. In figure 1, there is a complete fractures. In figure 2, that is some contact with the two bones, that is incomplete fractures. So any break in the continuity of the bone, that is defined as a fractures. So fracture is defined as a break in the continuity of the bone that may be displaced. That means it may be wide apart, or it may be in contact with both the ends. So that is also fractures. So when you say sometimes there is a hairline fracture, we say just a line is going, there is a break in the continuity of the bone. That is also fractures. When it's high velocity trauma, then the bones are apart. That is also fractures. So any break in the continuity of the bone, that is called fractures. So in this picture, you see one is complete fractures. There is no contact between both the ends, whereas in the other pictures, there is one side it is in continuity, other side it has given way. So this is the example of the incomplete and complete. In picture 1, incomplete, you hardly notice any visible break in the fracture line. But if you trace the outline, there is a break, unicortical break on the medial side of the bone. On the other side, you see the X-ray of the forearm, there is complete break in the radius with some sort of deformity also. That is angulation that we will discuss later. So by definition, closed fracture may be simple or compound. It was the term used in old books. Nowadays, we use closed fracture, open fracture, and complicated fractures. So what do you mean by closed fractures? Closed fractures are basically simple fractures. They doesn't communicate with the external environment. Okay? So when there is no break in the soft tissue surrounding the bones, those fractures are called closed fractures. Okay? Whereas the fracture of the bone with soft tissue injury, wounds over there, which is communicating with the external environment, they are called open fractures. Why this is important? Because the management of closed fractures and open fractures is different. So you should, whenever a patient comes, whether it's a closed or open, you have to decide the plan of management accordingly. So in open fractures, because there is a soft tissue injury, wound is there, contamination is there, so the chances of infection and all those things are always there if you don't take proper precautions while treating this type of fractures. So the one is closed fractures, the other is open fractures. Next is complicated fractures. When you say complicated, because if you see the anatomy of the bone, there are certain situations, certain areas where the neurovascular structures. So in orthopedics, we are not dealing with only bones. We are dealing with the soft tissue surrounding over there, the neurovascular structures over there. That all is dealt by the in orthopedics. So you have to take care of everything. So if you see in these pictures, there are certain situations where the neurovascular structures like artery, vein, and nerve, they come in close contact with the bones. And if there is a fracture because of the spike, because of the configuration, that may injure sometimes the neurovascular structures while passing from there, and that will lead to some other problems. Okay, they are really life-threatening if the arterial injury is there. So if you don't tackle, the patient may go in shock, and ultimately, if you miss it, you may have to amputate, or patient may die because of the arterial bleed and all those things. So these type of fractures associated with neurovascular injury, they are called as a complicated fractures. Sometimes systemic injury is also there with other system involved like chest, brain, so head injury. So those are all fracture associated with this condition. They are complicated fractures. So by definition, there are three types: close, open, and complicated. So what is dislocation? So when the bone breaks, that is called fractures. And when the two bones which meet at certain point, and if the relation is disturbed, these are called dislocations. So we will be discussing dislocation, subluxation, and fracture dislocations. So what is dislocation? This is an example of the shoulder joint. You see the scapular glenoid is there and head of the humerus. When they articulate, they make a shoulder joint. So when the relation between both the bones, they are completely separated, they are not aligned, that is called dislocations. So complete separation of the articular surface, that is called dislocations. And the dislocation may be depending upon the shift of the distal fragment in relation to the proximal fragment. So in this example, it may be anterior, it may go posterior, it may go inferior, it may go superior. These all will be dealt in individual chapters. Today we will I want to familiarize you with the terms which we will be using in the orthopedics. So what is subluxation then? The subluxation is an incomplete separation. Sometimes patients come with dislocation, sometimes they come with a partial incomplete separation. That means partial relationship is maintained over there. Okay? So in subluxation, the joint function in anatomical position only. So it has to be reduced to have a proper function of those joints. What is fracture dislocation? Again, the example is of the shoulder joint. So sometimes there is dislocation also with fracture of some components of the humeral head or the glenoid. So if that is fracture is also there, like in GT, sometimes lesser trochanter or greater tuberosity or lesser tuberosity. If there is fracture is there with dislocation of the joint, that is called fracture dislocations. So whenever you want to confirm, we always ask how you diagnose. One is clinical, the other is by radiological. Now, pathological. Traumatic, when you need a good amount of force to break the bone. In pathological fractures, the bones are so weak, so even a minor trauma can produce the fractures. Like in conditions like cystic bony cyst, tumor or infection because of these conditions. Even in old age, because of the osteoporosis, so even a small amount of force is enough to reproduce the fractures. Why this is important? That will guide you the amount of soft tissue injury over there. So in high velocity trauma, like fall from height, road traffic accident, they are mostly, they produce a significant amount of soft tissue damage. And soft tissue is important for the healing of the fractures because the vascularity of the bone is supplied by the periosteum, the soft tissue surrounding the fractures, and endosteal supply. So that's why some fractures heals very nicely, some it takes a lot of time. So it all depends upon the soft tissue conditions, open fractures, and all these things. So that's why fracture is also called nowadays, it's a broken bone inside a soft tissue. It's a soft tissue injury with a broken bone inside. So soft tissue has a utmost importance to get the good outcome of the fracture treatment. So one is pathological. You have to know the elderly people, they are mostly osteoporotic, bone are weak, and if there's certain tumor or cyst or infection they are there, they can produce a pathological fracture. Here you don't need a good amount of force. Simple patient will tell you, I was just getting out of the bed and fell down and had a fracture over there. So this is the example you see in this picture. This is an X-ray of the distal femur. The bone is already rarefied, and just a small amount of force is enough to break the bone, to reproduce the fractures. This is an example of osteosarcoma. It's a tumor of the femur that has reproduced the fractures. Next comes the mechanism. So why the importance of mechanism? Now it sounds very funny when you ask the patients, Kosari Lordnuva, Kosari Bansyu. But actually we want to know the displacement, the amount of force so that it can damage the soft tissue, because we want to take care of the soft tissue also. The force that may produce the fracture displacements. That's why we always ask the patients how you fell down. What was the position of your hand or foot while landing on the ground? Are you hit by the vehicle from the back or side? So that will guide you. So what are the parts that may have got injured? What are the things to look after? So mechanism is always important. Very important to know the fracture patterns. So one is amount of force, whether it's a treble force, that means it's a pathological fractures. You have to look after the sources of the pathology, why this has occurred. And if a high velocity or good amount of magnitude is required to break the bone, it's a non-pathological or traumatic fractures. Direction of force, that may be direct force or indirect force. So direct force, they produce some pattern of the fractures, whereas indirect force, they have a different pattern of the fractures. So if you know the direction of the force, if you know the mechanism of the amount of force, so that will guide you while reducing those fractures while treating. That's why you have to know all these things. So this is the example. This is the indirect force on long bones. Again, example of the humerus. If you see in these pictures, there is a long spiral fracture over there. So these type of fractures, if you see in X-ray these type of fractures, that means the force is of twisting in nature. That will reproduce. So any spiral fracture, that will reproduce a spiral fracture line. Okay, so if you see these type of fractures, that means these are unstable fractures. So these type of fractures, unstable, you can't treat with conservative method. That means by plasters and all those things. So some sort of operative intervention is required to maintain the position of this fracture in an anatomical positions. So if you know the mechanism, if you know the fracture pattern, it will be easy for you to treat those fractures. See, this is another example. Again, indirect force on long bones, but here the force is angulated. That was a rotating, twisting force that produces a spiral fracture, where if there is a angulation force, that will produce a transverse fractures, or sometimes a direct blow over there that will produce a transverse pattern of the fractures. These fractures, they take long time to heal in comparison to the spiral fractures. Why? Because the surface area of the fracture is big in a spiral fracture in comparison to this one. So these are all important. Why the certain fractures heals in a certain time, other takes longer time. So these are all depends upon the fracture pattern also. So when there is a angulation as well as axial compression, something which is coming from the top to bottom. So that type of fractures, that will produce a fracture line with a transverse line over there, transverse line, and transverse line over there, as well as a butterfly fragment in between. Okay, so there is a butterfly fragment over there, you can see, and there is a transverse line going through. These are, one cortex is intact, other is unstable. So this is again an example of another fractures. Here there is a lot of angulation is there, that with axial compression and twisting force. So these type of angulation, axial compression, and twisting force, they produce a short oblique type of fracture pattern. So the bone, if you see the bone, there are different types of bone. One is upper end is epiphysis and metaphysis and the diaphysis. The diaphysis, they are the cortical area, whereas the epiphysis and metaphysis, they are the cancellous area. So the end bones, they are of metaphyseal in nature. So when there is a fractures that produce, when there is a vertical compression, that produces more than one fracture fragment. That is called comminuted fractures. Here are multiple pieces of the fractures over here. So these are comminuted fractures. Similarly, in a spine also, because the nature of the bone is cancellous, they are soft. So when there is a direct or indirect, they may produce a different pattern that may be burst or that may be wedge compression fracture pattern. Certain area like in patella and olecranon. So if you see the patella, there is a quadriceps muscles and quadriceps tendon which is attached to the tibial tuberosity. Similarly, in olecranon, there is the triceps aponeurosis which is attached over there. So when there is a forceful contraction against the resisted movement that produces avulsion or transverse pattern of the fracture of these sigmoid bones. So depending upon the fracture geometry, that may be transverse fractures, oblique fractures, spiral fracture, comminuted fracture, and segmental fractures, like we just discussed in mechanism. And here is the example of the transverse fractures, oblique fractures, butterfly fragment, spiral, comminuted, and segmental. So transverse fractures, how it happens? It's a bending force or a direct blow. Oblique, short oblique, there is an axial as well as rotation and bending. All three are combined that produces short oblique. Butterfly, axial compression with rotation, they will produce one butterfly segment over. The spiral, it's a twisting, comminuted need, and the segmental they need. So as the fracture pattern increases, the severity also increases. So whenever the patient comes with a history of trauma in emergency, how we diagnose? So there is always a history. In history, we ask how you fell down, what was the mode of injury. That is important in our part. How it happened and what are the problems. So normally the patient comes with pain. When there is an injury, there is pain, there is a swelling because of the internal bleed over there. There is a deformity depending upon the force or depending upon the landing on the ground. So whatever displacement occurs, that occurs because of the one is the force, the other is the position of the limb at the time of injury. So pain, swelling, deformity, loss of function. And at last, you always look for the neurovascular symptoms like whether you are having any tingling or numbness sensation that will guide you or that will guide you whether there is a neurovascular injury or not. So one is history is very important, very quick because the patient is in pain. So don't hurt the patient. We always have a brief look. And then comes the local examination. One is systemic examination, other is local examination. Systemic examination is important, particularly in elderly patients with some comorbidities or any pathological conditions, if they have history of tumor, some surgery. So that is important in examination part. Most of the time, we go for the local examination. Local examination is the area where the patient has problems. And then comes the investigations. So for a diagnosis of any fractures, you have to go for the history, then examination, and to support your diagnosis, we need investigation. So in history, trauma, whether it is a pathological and non-pathological, okay, you have to rule out that one. In young patient particularly, it's most of the time non-pathological, traumatic conditions. In elderly patients or previous any disease or any cancer or any problems, they produce a pathological fractures. So from history only, how it happened, how much force, posterior Lord Novo, that will guide you what is the problems. The next is mechanism, fall from height, road traffic accident, pedestrian hit by a vehicle or a driver. So these are all indicating that these are high velocity trauma. So the amount of injury, amount of soft tissue, amount of fracture pattern, that all will be severe enough. Whereas in pathological, you don't need a good amount of force. A simple trauma can also reproduce it. Complain how the patient comes, pain, sharp, increased by movement. When the injured limb is moved, patient will have increase in pain, and which won't be radiating. But radiating pain are particularly of neurological involvement. Next is loss of function. That means the part which is injured, he can't function from that limbs. Deformity, depending upon the displacement, patient may have no deformity or sometimes obvious deformity. And the complications like neurovascular complications are there that may reproduce sometimes some other complication condition, compartment and all those things. They have their own symptoms. And apart from this, we have to always look for the other vital organs also, like head, chest and abdomen. Because whenever an injured patient comes to an emergency or anyone, our motto is always to save life of the patient first. So life comes first, then comes the limb, and then comes the function. So don't go after the fractures. It's not an emergency. Life is an emergency. So then after the brief history, then comes the examination. Examination constitutes general examination and local examination. General examination is for the systemic problems, and local examination is related with our orthopedic problems. So the general examination, mainly I told you, it's life is first. So look for the ATLS protocol, like Vital signs, shock, airway, breathing and circulation, it has to be assessed first. If everything is stable enough, there is no any other systemic involvement like head, chest and abdomen, then you go for the local examination. Similarly, in old age patient with the pathological fractures, with comorbidities or previous history of any cancers, you have to have a history of those things, how they are treating, what are the medications they are having. These all are important before deciding the treatment. Then comes the local examination. Local examination in orthopedics, like in other subject also, it constitutes inspection, palpation, movement, and measurement. Okay, these are the four. Normally, in medicine and surgery, you go for inspection, palpation, percussion. Here, it's something different because we are dealing with the upper and lower limbs, which is mainly used for the movement and locomotion. So that's why our examination is look and feel is the same. Look is inspection, feel is the tenderness, but movement and measurement are important because nobody will have to a short limb or a longer limb after the treatment, isn't it? So that's why these are important in our distance. So look, feel, move, and some special tests are there, and measurement is important in all. These are the four headings in which. So look, what does it mean? Look means without touching the patients, whatever you see, that all comes under the look. That means inspection. So that is soft tissue problem, soft tissue conditions, as well as the bony landmarks. There are certain areas where you can have a obvious prominent bones are there. By looking at those, you can obviously make, okay, what is the problem over there? Okay. Next comes the feel. So in trauma conditions, it's the only tenderness which we can feel, but in cold, there are certain other in feel you can have the shape, size of the bones. So all this has to be taken care of. So in feel, we have soft tissue feeling. Now you are allowed to touch the patient. You can have the soft tissue over there. How the soft tissue conditions are there, any swelling is there, what is the size, shape, and all the details are examined in feeling. But in traumatic conditions, the tenderness, that is a pain which is elicited by touching the bone, that is a definitive sign of any fractures. Okay. Next comes the movement. So whenever a long bone breaks, there is an abnormal movement at the fracture ends. Okay, it won't move in a single one. When one single bone is broken, it will move in a different direction. But while moving, testing this, you shouldn't hurt the patient also. If the patient is having pain, you can avoid this test. And crepitus is the term which is used by rubbing. It is a sound produced or sound felt while moving the ends of the bone. It's some gritty sensation felt by the hand. That is called crepitus. When you fracture ends are rubbed against each other, that produces that sound, or that is felt by the hand. That is called crepitus. Apart from this, you should do always some special test. I always ask my resident or juniors, whenever a patient comes, of an injured patient, always feel for the distal neurovascular status. Most of the time, because when there is a fracture, you never know, it may be a spike and all those things. Sometimes they can damage or they can press the neurovascular structures lying in close contact over there, and you won't feel pulse and sensation in the distal part. And if you miss those things at the time of examination, after treatment, it has a certain period of time. If you don't manage those things in those stipulated time, you won't have a good outcome. There are situations where you have to amputate, even amputate the limbs, and Patient may sue you for a medical legal purpose also, for further assessment also. Always have a distal neurovascular examination must be done, and it must be documented in the file if it's present at the time of presentations. And measurement, this is always important because God has given us two hands and two legs. So one is always for the comparison with the normal. While treating, we want to maintain the same length and those things in comminuted fractures and all those things. So measurement is also important while treating the patients. So these are the clinical examination by which you have history, you have a local examination. Now you will come with a provisional diagnosis. After examining this, you will come, there is a probably suspected supracondylar fractures or fracture of the humerus or fracture of the humeral head or fracture femur, whatever femur. And to confirm those provisional diagnoses, then we go for the investigations. So we have our investigation tools are mainly X-ray, which is available in every center nowadays. And there are some other special investigation tools like CT scan and MRIs. That is also important. But even a good quality of X-ray can give you enough information to diagnose those fractures. So X-ray is an essential requirement. And whenever we ask for the X-ray, we always ask for two views. It's a two-dimensional pictures. So we always ask two views, anterior-posterior and lateral view. Why? This is important because sometimes you may miss because bone are not always straight. There are certain angulation and all those things. So if only one view, sometimes you may miss the fractures. That's why we always ask for two views. That is, most of the time it's conventional AP and lateral view. But there are certain areas where we have a special views also we ask for from the X-ray that will be dealt in the respective topics. So for the X-ray, it's a rule of two. We always follow rule of two. What is that? Two views, that is AP and lateral. Two joints. Whenever you ask for the X-ray in the long bones, we always look for the joints above and below the fractures. So if you don't see, sometimes in the segmental fractures, if you won't have a full screen of the long bones, you may miss the other fractures. That's why two views, two joints, two occasions. So, sorry, this is the example of the fracture dislocation of the vertebra spine. Just see in AP view, just to show you, in AP view, it's almost looking straight. There is no any obvious deformity. But in lateral view, you see it's a D12 vertebra. This is D12. This is D11. So this alignment is normal. It has shifted forward. Okay. So if you see only this X-ray, this is AP view. It looks normal to me. So there is no injury. But looking at this X-ray, there is extensive amount of injury and there is dislocations. Patient may have paralysis of the lower limb and all those things. Similarly, this X-ray, is it adequate? No. So there is a fracture. This is the X-ray of the forearm. Just he confused. He thought the problem is in the elbow only. So he must have asked for the elbow. So only elbow is focused. Okay, what is problem over there? The radial head is dislocated. There is fracture of the ulna also. So you have to look for the distal radio-ulnar joint also. So that's why the rule of two is always followed. Two views, two joints, two occasions. Sometimes it is important. Sometimes in pediatrics, because the epiphyses, they are not fused, They are the area which grows. They are not fused. So sometimes that mimics as a fractures. You are confused over there. So you have to have a X-ray of the normal limb also to see whether that epiphysis is present over there also or not. So for comparison, two limbs, two occasions in scaphoid fractures, it's some special. In scaphoid fractures, sometimes in initial X-ray it looks normal. It has a special view, scaphoid views, that is done by a different way. But in spite of that, you don't see any fracture. So what we ask for the patient, we just immobilize it and ask the patient, I am having suspicion you are having a scaphoid fractures, but it's not seen in the X-ray, but I am immobilizing you. You come again after 10 days, we will again repeat the X-ray and we will see. Okay. So that is one way of confirming, because when after 10 days there is some marginal necrosis and you will have a clear fracture visible line over there. Sometimes special X-rays are done, particularly stress views are used to do if there is a fracture around the joints, because they are the metaphyseal bones and they are compressed, you won't see. So a stress view used to be done to see how the fractures fragments are falling and where they are. But nowadays, the new advances like CT scan and MRI has come up. So it's not done, but you should know these are the, if you don't have a CT and other, a stress view is also the way which we can give you idea regarding the fracture of the bones near the joints. So like in this example, just see, this is an X-ray of the knee joint. So in picture, if you see, the bone is almost normal and alignment with the feet. This is femur, this is tibia. The joint is almost congruous, maintained. So if you do the X-ray without seeing the patients, that's why you should always clinically examine the patients. Though there is no any bone injury, X-ray looks normal, you will dispose of the patient, okay, there is fine, nothing has happened to you. But simple, just by doing the stress test, he has given a valgus stress test and see this ligament, the collateral ligament, medial collateral ligament, this is the lateral collateral ligament, the medial collateral which is ruptured over there, that has given way. And now, if you do the X-ray, this is the picture. The same patient, after a stress view, stress is given from this valgus and from middle to outside, and the middle joint is open now. So this is also very good. Initially we used to do, but nowadays we straightway ask for the MRI. That is a different way. So now, while asking again how to describe when the X-ray comes, you are allowed to read it. So first thing, what you have asked, so this X-ray of is which side, right side or left side? What is the side which you have asked for? X-ray of the elbow or X-ray of the forearm or X-ray of the arm or X-ray of the leg? That is the site. Localization, which area? Is the whole diaphysis or is the joints? So where is the problem? That you have to say the X-ray of right elbow joint showing this and this with a fracture of the supracondylar area or medial condyle or lateral, whatever it is. So you have to describe in this scenario situation. Then comes the pattern of the fractures. So it is a transverse fracture, a spiral fractures, or comminuted fractures, depending upon the fracture geometry. Then comes the displacement. Displacement is always in comparison to the proximal fragment. So proximal is in alignment. According to the distal relation of the distal fragment, whether it's a medial, it has gone medial or lateral, anterior or posterior, it may go in any direction. That is shift. If there is an angulation that I will show you in the next pictures, that is called angulation tilt. Next is if rotation is there, that is twist. And if the fracture is overriding or impacted, that produces shortening. So these are all clinical conditions which you can describe after looking at the X-ray. So this is the example. You see that these are the displacement which may occur. So in this picture, this is in contact with the bone, body. The distal fragment, what is happening over there? It should remain over there. It has shifted this way, isn't it? So this is called shift. If the bone, it may go medially, it may go laterally, it may go up, it may go down, it may come anterior, it may go posterior. So depending upon the mechanism, the fractures, they have a shape. Tilt is something like this. This is tilt. When it is angulated, that is called tilt. Though this is in the same line, why there is a twist, how you can differentiate? So for that, you should know the proper anatomy. So if you see in these pictures, the head is there, neck is there, trochanter is there, and even the condyle, both the condyles are quite visible. Okay, they all are in the same line. Whereas if you see this one, what happens? The condyle is rotated, the distal fragment is rotated. They are superimposed one over another. It's not, both the condyles are not visible like in this normal condition. So this is called twist. And shortening is the term when the distal fragment has migrated proximally. So that produces shortening of the limb. So these are the displacement. Why this is important? Because when you go for the surgery of these fractures, if you don't know all these things, you can't fix. This looks almost anatomical. You can't fix. When you fix in this condition, what will happen in this condition? Then what will happen? The patient will have a difficulty in walking. If you fix in this condition, what will happen? The patient will have a short limb. So these all has to be corrected while treating the fractures. So healing of the fractures, there are two types. One is primary repair, the other is secondary repair. Primary repair, that is by without callus formation, whereas secondary repair, they produce callus formation. So bone is a living tissue and it has an inherent character to heal by itself. Okay, so that heals, like in example in animals and all those things. They don't have a doctors. They don't, when there is a fracture, even those bone heals. But our aim being as a human being, being a doctors, our aim is to heal those bone in a proper anatomical or acceptable position so that we can have a proper function after the healing of the bones. So that's why whenever there is a fractures, it has an inherent character to heal by itself, but our aim is to make it heal in a proper, aligned, acceptable position so that the person after healing will have a good functional outcome. So two types of healing is there, primary healing and secondary healing. Primary repair or secondary repair, the same thing. The primary healing, they are produced by rigid fixation. That means there is no any active motion at the fracture site. Okay, so they produce primary repair. They don't produce any callus which is visible in X-ray. Their mechanism over there is cutting cone mechanism. That is, that chapter will be taken in healing topics. Okay, so active Hammersmith remodeling is there, but it takes longer time. Whereas secondary repair, they are reproduced by without rigid fixation. That means some sort of motion is there at the fracture site. Okay, and mostly they are produced by the internal fixation. And there are different stages of fracture repair. Like whenever there is a fractures, the fracture hematoma is there. they come over there, the bones are broken, they send us signals, and they produce, they get organized in certain days, and some inflammatory cells are come over there, and they get organized and they produce a woven bone, the cellular matrix and all those things are deposited over there. They produce the woven bone, later on lamellar bone is formed, and at last, after remodeling, that bone which was broken, it is completely repaired and looks like almost normal as before. So different stages are there. This is just a brief I am showing you in the pictures. There are 5 stages: fracture of stages of hematoma, stages of inflammation, formation of soft callus, formation of hard callus, and remodeling. The stages of remodeling. These are the 5 stages by which any bone they heal. So what is the time? Some patient, most of the time they ask you, so there is a formula given by Perkins, and we call it Perkins formula. For upper limb union to take place, that is spiral fractures, they heal in 3 weeks, whereas in transverse fractures, they heal in 6 weeks. That means union, the callus formation is more early in spiral fractures in comparison to the transverse fractures. Why? I told you initially, the surface area of the spiral fracture is quite long, big. That's why the callus formation and healing also occurs faster in comparison to the transverse fractures. So union time is 3 weeks for spiral fractures. If you see the fracture pattern is transverse, it takes 6 weeks. For consolidation, double the time. It takes 6 weeks in upper limb and 12 weeks for the transverse fractures. Similarly, in lower limb, just double it. For spiral fractures, 6 weeks, transverse fracture, 12 weeks. And this is the formula given for the adult. For the pediatric age group, children, just half of this time is required to heal the fractures. So that was for the fracture in adults. Something a little bit about the fracture in children. Why children is different from the adult? Because their bones are in the growing age group. Their bones are different from the adults, and they have epiphysis, growth plate, metaphysis, which has not fused. That's why we have to look for all those things so that to avoid the complications of the fractures which may reproduce by growth arrest and deformity. So the pediatric fractures and adult fractures, they are different. You should know what are the time for the epiphysis to fuse of a different bones, and accordingly you shouldn't damage the growth plate. And the nature of the bone, they are more elastic, more malleable. The periosteum are quite thick in the pediatric age group bones. That's why they are not broken like brittle like in adults. They just give way. They're just plastic deformation, bowing injury is there, but that is also fractures. So it's different from the adults. Children bones are more malleable, allowing a plastic type of bowing injury. The next is periosteum is thicker over here in comparison to adults and usually remains intact on one side of the fracture, which helps us to stabilize, while reduction decreases the amount of displacement and lower incidence of open fractures in children than in adults. So because of the periosteum, which covers the bone all around, they are thicker over there. They don't give way easily. That's why normally it's the only unicortical most of the time breaks. The other time is always intact. And those fractures are called green stick fractures. So because of this thicker periosteum, it's easy for us while stabilizing the reduction, the decrease the amount, the displacement of the fracture are less in children, and there is less chance of open fractures in children. That's why most of the fractures are treated conservatively in children in comparison to adults. The other important factors in children are healing is more rapid. Open reduction, that means operative intervention is very rarely indicated. Yes, there are certain situations, certain fractures, certain these things where you have to go for open reduction or close reduction and treating it. But most of the time, the healing is rapid and conservative management equally good. Why? Because there is a high remodeling rate. So as the growth increases, the bone increases in height. The remodeling chance, even a deformed bone can look normal when he attains the skeletal maturity. But to remodeling, there should be enough age or enough time remaining for the remodeling to occur. Once the growth plate is fused, there is very less chance of remodeling. Similarly, the injury which is around the joint, the growth plate is damaged, that will lead to growth arrest and growth disturbance or deformed limbs can be open. Often missed because pediatric age group patients, a baby or the child, they can't properly communicate with you. So you have to be cautious enough. You have to observe the patients where the problem is. Most of the time in pediatric age group, the baby who have not started talking and all those things, you have to look by the examination. You have to identify what is the problem, where is the problem, and accordingly you go for the investigation. And sometimes X-ray of both the limbs for comparison is required, as I have told you. To use two occasion, two limbs sometimes. So in pediatric age group, sometimes we have to go for the two limbs X-ray. So fracture in children, when there is a fractures, there is a fascial injury. If you see in these pictures, this is the picture of the ankle joint. You see these are the lines. You may be confused with these are the lines. You may be confused with the fractures. But no, this is epiphysis, this is the growth plate which has not fused, this is the metaphysis, and these are all diaphyseal portions. So these are growth plates. This is epiphysis, which has not fused. So fascial injury, again, it will another separate topics is there. 30% of the fractures occurs through this, twice as often in upper extremities as in comparison to lower extremities. And Salter Harris has classified these fractures based on the radiographic appearance of the fractures. Why this is important? So if you allow the fractures to heal in these positions, what will happen? This will be malunited. This won't be, the growth plate is disturbed over there. The patient will have a deformed foot. If you see the ankle, it's subluxated, isn't it? So the problem will happen after this. So this is the classification of Salter Harris type 1 type fractures. There are 6 types. This is type 1, only metaphyseal. Hardly you see any fracture over there. This is type 1. Here, this is type 2. What happens? There is a separation from the growth plate with a metaphyseal flake. This is metaphyseal flake. This is metaphyseal. This is type 2. Type 3 is the only epiphysis fractures with a growth plate separation. Type 4, there is fracture of epiphysis, fracture of growth plate, fracture of metaphysis. All are involved over here. In type 5, it's a cross injury, very difficult to diagnose in X-ray, plain X-ray, and there is a crushing of the growth plate only. And sometimes it dilates. You have to see the posterior also. This is another example. The fracture in children, most common site of fracture caused by child abuse. Child abuse is quite common in our society nowadays, and you should be very cautious whenever a patient who is not in a age group who can communicate, and if they come to you with fractures, you should be always suspicious about the child abuse, particularly the fractures around humerus, tibia, and femur. So normally they don't produce these fractures unless there is a significant trauma. But most of the time in OPD also, in emergency also, parents come with these things. So that is, they are the baby who can't speak to you, and if you baby who is not in this position to speak or communicate, if they have a fracture like this, you should always have in your mind that this may be a case of child abuse also. And in those type of cases, you need a skeletal survey. You have to look for the other part of the body also to have a injury pattern. So you should be always suspicious in a saying. We normally teach our resident also. So in the age group of less than 2 years, which is not able to communicate, you should be always suspicious of child abuse. So certain pathological conditions which may produce, that all will be dealt in separate topics. Like just to name few, they are congenital disease like osteogenesis imperfecta, sometimes osteomyelitis infection like osteomyelitis, bony cyst, simple bone cyst, aneurysmal bone cyst. They are the tumor that also causes the bone to weak. Certain disease like osteoporosis, osteomalacia, Paget's disease, they are the metabolic disease that produces the bone to become weak, and they may have fractures. Certain primary bone tumors or sometimes secondary tumors which has metastasized from the other system, they also are the causes for the pathological fractures. So to diagnose the pathological fractures, history is important. So cerebral trauma, history, constitutional symptoms, and if there is a history of malignancy and all this, that is always suspicious for the secondary sources. Examination, general examination for malignancy infection, local, tenderness, swelling, and deformity, same. The radiological examinations are always there. Of the radiology, X-ray of the lesion, MRI, CT scan to look for the other sources, CT, chest to look for the pulmonary metastasis, and bone scan is obviously nowadays a gold standard for us to look after for the increased optic or secondary metastasis. And in laboratory investigation, mainly is the ESR, CRP, acid phosphatase, benzone protein, LDS, they are increased in metastatic tumors. Management, our aim is not to treat the disease. Our aim is to make the patient comfortable till his life so that he will be pain-free for the remaining life of this man. And we just stabilize the patient and send the patient for the chemotherapy, radiation, and other modalities of treatment. So the indications are again that will be discussed in the next chapter. So fracture management is always, general aim is to save the life of the patients. So once you have saved the life, fracture is never an emergency. First is always to save the life of the patients. Once you have saved the life of the patient, then you go for the local examination, local diagnosis and treatment of the injured part. So local aim is the rapid recovery of the injured part and to restore its function as its previous. So shock, head injury, chest, abdomen, they are the life-threatening conditions. So you have to take care of it in emergency. And the local management sometimes from the orthopedic point of view are the ischemia that produces compartment syndrome and open fractures. They are emergency for us. So management is always save life, then you save limb. And once you save the limb, then you always try to have function also. So management is 4R, reduction, recognition and reduction. Once you have reduced the fractures to its normal position, then you have to retain it even by cast or by operative means, by using implants. Soft tissue treatment is utmost importance for the healing of the patient. So you have to be very conscious. You shouldn't damage the soft tissue even during surgery or even at the time. So soft tissue treatment is of utmost important. And once you have taken all those precautions, all those care of these things, then after healing comes the functional activity and rehabilitations. So reduction is always done under anesthesia. That may be close, open, X-ray of the and direction of the force, displacement you have to know. And normally we give traction and reverse the mechanism. That's why I have told you why we ask Kasai Lorno. You should know the displacement, you should know the mechanism of injury, and you have to reverse it at the time of treatment to make the bone align in an anatomical or functional position. So if the fracture is around the joint, you need an anatomical reduction. That means it must be as near to the anatomical position. For the diaphyseal and metaphyseal, we need a functional alignment. So there are two terms. Any fractures which is intra-articular, which involves the joint, we need anatomical reduction. That means there shouldn't be a step, there shouldn't be any gap. Whereas the metaphyseal and diaphyseal fractures, they have a functional reductions. Some sort of overlapping, and this thing can be accepted. That we'll discuss how much to accept or not. Anatomical reduction is a must for these things. Dislocation, intra-articular fractures, and fracture both bone forearm. X-ray image and help control reduction, and always remember, ask the patient to come back in OPD or to follow up in OPD. So if you suspect there is chances of redisplacement after applying cast and all those things. So reduction can be acceptable if alignment will not affect function. Remodeling can correct deformity depending upon the age. You have to think of that. There are certain criteria how much to accept. So only thing which you don't accept in long bones are rotational deformity. They are never corrected. So rotational deformity is never accepted. Otherwise, most of the other are reduction timing is immediate, is a must in vascular injury, spinal cord or nerve injury, urgent in open fractures. Dislocation is always emergency, and closed fractures can wait if facilities do not permit urgent management. Immobilization, life is movement and movement is life. It has to be immobilized. Do not immobilize any joint unnecessarily. So only that much is how much you require, that must be immobilized, not all the joints. So immobilization methods, we have plaster of Paris are there, traction is there, internal fixation like plates, screw, nails, and external fixator we have. These are the devices by which we can immobilize the fractures. So something about open fractures, I have told you initially, fracture which communicate with the external environment, they are open fractures. This is always emergency. If you don't clean it, then chances of infection, non-union, malunion, they are always there. So general care, again, life-saving, ATLS protocol, antibiotic is must, tetanus prophylaxis should be given, splintage can be given, and then you go for the X-ray, and once everything is okay, then you take the patient to the operation theater. Sedation is to be given, clean the wound, irrigation through normal saline or clean water, whatever is available. Dilution is the solution for pollution. Then comes the debridement. It's a method by which we remove all the dead necrotic tissues. Decontamination of the bone, if there is a foreign particles, dirt and all those things. And if the wound is clean enough, you can go for closure. If not, if you suspect this may have infection, you wait. Leave the wound open, just put a stay and immobilize it. Thank you. Any questions?